SaaS Therapy.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm joined by my co-host, Casey Trujillo. Hey, Casey. Glad you're here.
Todd, I am so excited for this episode today. This is going to be fantastic.
Me too. We are blessed to be joined by Justin Edwards. Hey, Justin, we're so glad you're here today. Before we jump in, I think it's helpful for the audience to know Justin and who he is. We're excited to interview him and get his insights. Justin Edwards is a leader. He runs he leads the revenue practice at Mercado Partners, where he's worked with some of the fastest growing companies in the world. He's been deeply engaged with Mercado Partners portfolio companies for the past 5 years, finding ways to accelerate their growth. And he actually began his career in one of the first SaaS startups in Utah, no doubt, which is awesome.
He's a goat,
Yeah.
Todd, is what
He's
you're
an
saying.
OG.
He's a
He's an
goat.
OG.
He's the original
That's
OG.
right.
Okay. That's right.
And Justin's core competencies include customer success, marketing integration, sales, lead generation, operations, and leadership. He also has an MBA from Brigham Young University. So super glad to have you here, Justin. Thanks for joining us for today's episode.
Thank you for having me. And I will say the fastest growing companies, we've had 9 exits of
Wow.
$1 billion in enterprise value at Mercado, and really proud of that. But the first startup in Utah actually we were selling visual voicemail. It was a NetWare loadable module, an NLM that attached a server, a Novell server, print and file server to a telephone system. So really proud of the roots and the background. Very first job out of college was a startup. So I can say that in my DNA, my professional DNA, we did everything back then, and startups and growth and all of that is definitely in my wheelhouse, and look forward to the conversation.
That's so good. And Justin, I think Todd and I are safe to say that we have someone that has experience in this field. So this is going to be fantastic. But we want to get to know you a little bit better. So we have a fun little game that we start out at each one of our podcasts when we have a guest, and it's called This or That. So it's just 2 options. You choose one of the options that best fits your personality and who you are. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
All right. Here's the first question. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
Oh, all right. Cats or dogs? This is going to tell a lot to the audience, Justin, right here. Cats or dogs?
Hands down, dogs.
And why is that?
Because I have a dog. I've always owned dogs. We've had cats and they don't like me. So I like things that like me back. Call me crazy.
See, already nuggets being dropped. Like things that like you back. I like that, Justin. Really well said. Okay, this one's a tough one. On your pizza, do you pineapple or no pineapple?
Pineapple all day long.
Right. All day long.
Comes from my days at in
That's
Hawaii.
right. You did your I left that off. You did your undergrad in Hawaii, right? So
did my undergrad. Got to give the tip of the hat to BYU Hawaii for the great time and the education.
Well, no, most people don't say those 2 things together when they go to BYU Hawaii. So that's fantastic that you received both. All right, this one's a tough one. You're gonna have to pay attention to this question, Justin. We got 2 more here. Superpower of choice. Okay. Would you rather have the ability to fly, but at a snail's pace, or be invisible, but only when no one is looking?
That's a tough one. Fly, right? You get the altitude, you get the vistas. You don't have to go fast. Sometimes you want to go fast, but you don't have to.
what if you could turn it off? Because then you could fall fast. Then it's like you're flying fast. That's almost the same thing. That's my justification. Yeah.
Right. And being invisible, you just don't know. So I have to go with flying slow.
All right. And the last one. This one's actually a really good one. Time travel. Would you rather travel back 100 years to meet your ancestors, or go forward 100 years to meet your descendants?
That's a good one. Basically, I would go backwards. I think a lot of what we do is where we came from. And so these foundational pieces, we're talking about customer success today. So I think it's you got to go on the foundational pieces and give a nod to the people that were before you. So,
Aw- Awesome. Well, Justin, welcome to SaaS Therapy. We're glad to have you here.
and we all need the therapy. So I appreciate it, especially in today's climate.
So true.
On that point, Justin, I think it'd be helpful as we dive in here and start talking. As you think about today's climate, you have the benefit of supporting a lot of SaaS companies and trying to figure out how they're going to grow and how they're going to succeed. And from your perspective, what would you say is probably the biggest challenge facing most startups today?
I would say growth rate
Mm.
decline. I do have the privilege of working with 24 of our portfolio companies. Some of them, half of them are venture. So we have a fund that actively deploying early capital, and then the majority of my work is done in the growth fund, which is the 5 to 100 million in revenue range. And I got to tell you, like a company that is in 5 million in revenue versus 100 million, it's dramatically different challenges, but everybody's facing the challenge of the economy right now. And so, when I do look at and work with the portfolio, we're all feeling that growth rate. That's something that is on top of mind for everybody because it impacts the valuation. And let's just face it, like a lot of people are in SaaS because the opportunity to have some kind of wealth event down the road, hopefully building equity in something. Ownership is an important element to people that are attracted to technology. They don't just want to take a paycheck. And so when we have bad economies, low growth rates, lower valuations, that really impacts the individual in terms of their opportunity and their worth in terms of the just the equity that they built in the time that they've spent in the company. So that would be the number one concern right now.
And Justin, you're going to find in this podcast that Todd's the smart one. I'm the dumb one. Todd's in product. I'm in sales. So Justin, just for the audience members here, when they hear growth rate, would you mind explaining that to me? What do you mean by growth rate, and why is that important? Like, why is that the one that's sticking out to you, and why are you mentioning that?
Um, Growth rate is an indicator of the health of the business, and investors, right or wrong, apply a growth rate to a multiple that gives you the valuation of your company. So that's when you have $1 million company that's valued at 100 million, that's 100 times revenue. And that's a company that's probably growing at 1,000 to 2,000%.
Hmm.
And so they take that growth rate and they see it as this real indication and signal of we need to be in that company. We're going to place a valuation and premium on their revenue. And it's a bet, early investing in an early company, because not many of them make it. But the ones that make it, and you get the right valuation as an investor, it becomes really important that you're making and placing really kind of strategic and thoughtful investments in these companies. And so growth rate is the indicator of the expansion year over year. There's different ways to measure that. The one I'm referring to is CAGR, compound annual growth rate. And that's just indicative of what you've done for the last 12 years based on previous year.
Hmm.
And you can, just depending on how you want to look at it. I can give you an example in the industry in Q1 of 2022 for all SaaS companies. The average was 60.2% CAGR. This year, or at the end of last year, September Q3, as we were heading into the last year, I don't have a real number right now, but it's at I think it's at 8.4% CAGR, and we ended
Wow.
up at this kind of sloping. So that's top of mind, and how that feels in a company. It's going to feel like deals aren't closing, deals aren't they're getting pushed to next quarter. Customers are really seeking value. They're reducing licenses
Hmm.
because all industries are kind of at a macro level are impacted by the growth rate. So it's been top of mind for a couple of years. When we entered into COVID, we started talking about efficient growth.
Mm.
And a lot of that has to do with just kind of like the period of time we are in as it relates to our industry SaaS as a monetization and revenue model.
So Justin, am I correct then in to have that growth? If I'm an organization right now, am I just trying to get as many leads as possible, and I'm just spending money on trying to get new acquisition of new customers? What am I trying to do? This is where we get into the therapy here. Give me some counsel, because I'm on that sofa right now, and I'm feeling what you're saying. Well, what would you recommend to me? What's some of these therapy recommendations?
Well, that's I don't know that there's a definitive answer. Every industry is a little bit different. Not all SaaS is the same, because you have different customers. It has more to do with your customer base and how they're impacted and the different variables there. I think, ultimately leads aren't converting, and that's a problem at the top of the funnel. So acquisition as a strategy for a younger company, a lot of times they don't actually just make that pivot and start balancing that out with maximizing the potential of their existing customer base. There's
Hmm.
many reasons why that doesn't happen. But there are a few kind of signals that indicate why that may or may not be something that they need to be focusing and transitioning on. You can look at organizational structure. There's just a lot that you can look at in terms of just the position itself. Um, when we talk about customer success as a function, and we talk about therapy, that's really a therapy that needs to be applied to our customer bases, which it's just not being applied properly. So, yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, traditional methods of getting revenue are kind of broken. Costs are going up in terms of leads. Those leads aren't converting. That's causing problems with growth rates. That's causing problems with personal goals, financial goals. It becomes real personal very fast, just a couple of data points.
So Justin, it sounds like when you think about growth rate, revenue is really what we're talking about. How do we get new sources of revenue? How do we increase the revenue that we're having, and how do we keep that growth sustaining over time? And when you're in a really challenging economic climate, your top of funnel activities that come from prospects who are not existing customers, maybe in the past you closed those at 20-25%, and now all of a sudden you're only closing 5% of those deals because people are tightening up the purse strings. And so maybe there's a way to get new revenue by refocusing your efforts on how can you strengthen your relationships with your existing customers and expand revenue opportunities within existing accounts. That was my attempt to try to restate what you said. Was that a fair restatement?
Yeah. Traditional. So think about acquisition, new customer logo acquisition as a form of growing your company in early stages in the, I would say early as in lower than 10 million in revenue. You're going to be focusing on bringing people into the top of the funnel and the new logo acquisition, and you're going to be making a splash. Think about the traditional funnels that we all work in SaaS, where we have awareness and then education and selection. When you have the awareness, it's why should they buy anything? So Casey, to your point, being sales background, mapping the marketing activities with sales and that alignment becomes a critical component to what we're trying to accomplish, because you're broadly talking about an awareness, and why should the potential customer or prospect think about this as an option? Are they
Hmm.
even aware that there's a challenge or issue? So really in sales language, that's why buy anything. And then you get down into the lower parts of the funnel, mid funnel, and it's all about education. So that's the pain, identifying why they should do something right now. So why should they buy now? And that's an urgency piece. So versus like buying tomorrow, and you want to have some kind of consequence for not making a decision, because a lot of times we're seeing in our deals that they're just getting pushed down,
Right.
you know, kick the can kind of thing, and the sales team tries to discount, causes all kinds of additional problems, because that ends up being one of your growth levers is monetization. So your pricing strategy plays a big role in your growth, and if you monkey with your pricing, then that devalues all the effort that you put in acquisition, you build value, and then all of a sudden you tell the customer, hey, we're going to discount it to get the deal done. It's not worth that much. You don't really need to use our software. It becomes your priority. That misalignment actually extends into the CS side of things as well. And so there's a couple of things that are in play there to answer your question, but acquisition as a method is slowed down. It used to be back in, I guess the prehistoric times of the mainframes and the mini computers and the white lab coats and the raised floors, and you had this kind of draconian attitude towards technology that you were privileged, you had to pay for access and programming time, you had all of these limitations to access to get to the efficiencies and optimizations, so you really had to pay up for it. Entered into a golden period where access was highly available. You could actually pay your way in, but also competition kind of kicked in, and you get into this idea that features acquisition and scaling end up being the play. And we were all trained that if we put more money in the top of the
Right.
funnel, we'll get more money at the bottom of the funnel.
Right.
What happens now that that's kind of broken a little bit?
Wow. So how do I start that? So let's say I'm an organization. You're speaking truth to me. Yes, that's happening to our business right now. We're not getting that clientele acquisition like we're used to. Okay, I want to go refocus a little bit more on my current customers because maybe I'm just seeing them as just getting the renewals in, and I'm not seeing expansion opportunities. What's maybe one or two best practices if I was going to start to create a strategy with my current customer base? What's one or two things, Justin, that you would advise this organization to look at?
There's a couple things when you look at, so across the board, things we've deployed that have worked in the portfolio. We're at a 42%, 42.5% CAGR across our portfolios. We were kind of heading in there. I need to check with our CFO, but we were on track to hit a 42% CAGR. Some of the things we're talking about in our portfolio companies is this idea that growing your existing customer base, it's easier to get their attention. They basically there's a willingness to listen. And to your point, what are some tactics that you can actually deploy? I think going back to fundamentals of the relationship and why CS was formed. Take a half step back. It's a relatively new function within an organization that is driven by recurring revenue, which before it was more perpetual. You would buy your licenses, you own them, and then it was up to you to extract value. Now it's so easy for customers to kind of get intrigued by what you're offering and then leave you or just be distracted. This position came about where Salesforce is the first documented kind of situation that I've come across, and you could probably correct me, but the person in charge of renewals, his last name was Dempsey at Salesforce, and in a leadership offsite, basically called to the attention of the executive leadership, Mark Benioff included, this idea that there was an 8% churn rate within their customers, and that was per month. And so do the simple math on that times 8, you're almost churning the entire customer base every year. So it was a problem based on the way that we're conducting business. So the monetization strategy of recurring revenue is causing this real idea that we have to be delivering value. So then the real question in my mind becomes, how do you deliver value? And really, when you think about the traditional methods of customer success and how it came about, and this idea that you need to kind of align with the customer and deliver value, we get lost and we stop focusing on the customer, and it becomes more about us. I'll throw kind of a statistic your way as it relates to just the idea that customer QBRs don't work today. CAPTA says 28% of customers think QBRs are valuable use of their time. So what does that tell you
Wow.
about the other, you know, uh,
Wow.
74% of your customers that don't really have the time to answer the survey? um, if 28% don't feel like it's a valuable use of your time, I have to think, okay, let's kind of dissect that a little bit. Let's dive deeper and say, what is the nature of a customer QBR today? And what does
Mm,
that feel like to a customer? And I don't feel it, I feel like it doesn't feel good to them because it's more about how it's a sales pitch. It's a thinly
yeah.
veiled sales pitch on why they should expand instead of delivering that value they're expecting. And I think that's the nugget I think we're all looking for is what is that value that the customer is expecting today.
I think that's such an interesting and really, I think, insightful point. So often when it comes to the so many CSMs are trying to figure out why their customers won't talk to them and why they won't spend time with them. And the expectation and the mindset of what the customer thinks the CSM's job is to do is to ensure that they're receiving the value that they signed up for whenever they subscribe to the software in the beginning. And yet oftentimes the CSM feels like their job is to just try to convince the customer that they're receiving value. And I think that's a totally different mindset, right? Your job is to deliver it, not convince me that I am delivering it. It's like it's like the CSM's job is to sometimes there can be this perception where the CSM's job is to come in and like convince me that the thing I'm getting is worth the money that I'm paying, even if it's not the thing I actually
Yeah.
want. And it creates an unnecessary friction between the customer and the CSM.
That's
Okay,
right.
we got to dive down into this. Todd, Justin, how do we I know this wasn't our topic, but how have you seen a successful QBR or just let's just say just a meeting? How do you change that? 28%, Justin, that shocked me. I'm like, "Holy cow, are you kidding me?" So, what are some things that you can do to make that better?
Well, I think that I think what it's saying is we haven't really understood what kind of value we're driving to the customer, and maybe organizational design is kind of at fault. In
Mm,
in my world, when I'm working and advising one of our CEOs or CROs, we don't have CROs in the early stage. It's something that kind of we migrate into. Customer success is something that we migrate into as well. And when you think about the origins of a company, it starts off with a CEO that knows how to sell the product. Maybe he's also developed the product. Usually there's a founding team, and you have someone that's actually responsible for getting customers in the door. And then from that, it's that catch all role. Like going back to my days at Colware, when I was a region manager for our firm, I was sales enablement. I was my sales development rep. I was the account executive responsible for the region number. I had to go in partnership enablement and activation. I had to go and kind of fulfill this role of customer success. And over time, you're able to kind of layer in support mechanisms, but oftentimes one of the things that we do really well is lay down pathways. But as humans in general, the research shows that we're really bad at like deconstructing pathways that have been created and creating new ones. And so
yeah.
we can lay down the track, but oftentimes we do it in a clumsy way, and it's just ad hoc, and we don't think about holistically how to design an organization to really meet the customer's need and deliver the value when you're not in the room. And so when you think about it in that kind of context, it becomes more about the customer. And I don't want to talk about customer centricity because it's over talked about,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we're not talking about it the right way because we're still using it in a self-serving way. And it's less about the customer, and it's more about how we can kind of drive expansion. But let's make no mistake, like if you're relying on pricing strategies and acquisition and expansion, which is really retention, getting customers renew and also expand their usage, cross sell, upsell, or just existing usage and add more seats or volume or however you're kind of priced. Um, the growth lever for acquisitions going down. So if you're counting on, as you get at scale, 25, 30, 40 million, you're going to start to want to see a rebalancing of your revenue growth rate coming from the three different growth pillars. And so
Mm,
discounting becomes way more important, sales team discipline and selling
mm,
value and not backing off of that. But then you also have to have really strong pipeline effort. And we can go on and on and on, but we have these clumsy attempts at meeting periodically with the customer via a QBR. And then we get into a situation where we don't have the pipeline to cover the numbers. So we have these
right.
desperate conversations. We start asking customers for favors. That's not delivering value. And so I think it's a slippery slope where we get off the track of delivering value really early in the process.
Mm.
And it's really hard to get back on track once we've walked off the path
So
there.
Oh man, Justin's shooting down all my sales
I know,
tactics, Todd.
Casey.
He's like all the things I
I
based
have
my career on. He's like,
I
don't
have
do
so
that. And I'm
much
like, oh my gosh, I should have talked to
I
this
have
guy
so much
earlier.
PTSD with working with a sales guy who just is like, will do anything to get the deal done no matter what. And even if it totally just is going to make life miserable for the customer and for the CSM long term. But like, so Justin, let me throw a scenario at you because I think there's two things that are coming to my mind based off of everything that you're saying. One is um, there's a there's an intentionality in the way that you need to grow your business. And I'll probably come back to this one rather than mix it in with the scenario, meaning like knowing when to build out some of these teams and how to build them and become more specialized in your organization. Like knowing when you're ready for that is important. So maybe we can circle back to that in a little bit. But one of the things that comes to my mind from a discounting perspective is, once if a seller offers a steep discount to a customer just to get the deal done, as an example, let's say they say, we'll just give you 40% off if you buy now, or we'll give you 30% off if you buy now. Well, when it comes time for renewal, the whole idea is like, well, that's a year one discount. But as soon as the renewal comes back in, they're not going to feel like you are going back to the original price that you had in your mind. They're going to feel like you're price gouging them and raising the price 30%. When you give a discount, even if you tell them it's temporary, there's no way in the mind of their customer that they're ever going to just agree that that's temporary. So that's the mindset that I've seen with different SaaS companies that run into this problem of like, yeah, it'll be fine. We'll just say we're going to raise it in year 2 30%, and the customer is going to not be happy about that. So two questions there is, one, is there a way to combat that, to help, to your point, have sellers have more discipline? Meaning like, if you are going to change what you're selling to the customer to get a price point, maybe it isn't discounting the price, maybe it's changing what values you're going to deliver at the start, as an example. And then the second thing is, can you remediate it? How do you remediate it? So that's probably a lot there of like, how do we prevent it and how do we remediate it when it does happen?
Yeah. It's one of those things that we I guess in the sales process, we're looking at this from a value perspective, delivery, but we're showing customers what they're doing wrong
Mm,
instead of actually showing them what we're doing right. And I
mm,
think that flip of the switch can actually cause a conversation to be very productive as it relates to
Hmm.
the value.
Could you give me an
I think
example of that, by the way, Justin? Because I love that idea of like, we're showing the customer what they're doing
yep.
wrong rather than what we're doing right. I I love that sentiment, but I'm like, I'm not sure I know exactly how to do that. I'd be curious do you have any examples that come to mind on that?
Yeah. So I would say, like, think about it from a standpoint of how what we've, it's effort, right? So early on, the effort of extracting what is the customer expecting from us in terms of value and delivering that value. And hopefully your product is geared
Yeah.
up in a way that you can actually demonstrate that value, and you're periodically checking in and you're showing benchmarks that are relevant to the customer. You have to monitor the progress. So we're not doing that. So identifying opportunities for growth in terms of what we're actually doing, the value that we're delivering, and we want to expand on that. An example would be, real world example would be a say regional sales manager VP of sales. Let's go down to the field level because that's where it starts because the pressure is top down in a lot of situations. An AE gets to the point where he's got one deal and he doesn't have anything to backfill that deal. And it's important for the company and it's going to make the quarter. It's 250K. The company needs 150K to reach their goals, to go back to the board so that everybody gets their kudos. And then we end up getting into this pattern where, like you say, we offer a discount to get the deal over the finish line. And it's anywhere between 150K and 250K. And really, we've actually educated the customer that there is this idea that they can get a discount on what we're offering, and there's that value is diminished. It's really hard to get back, like you say. You can't go the second year and have the discount go away. And I don't care who you are, if you're Oracle, if you're Adobe, these are all places I've been. Once that customer sees that discount, that's kind of the new norm. Also, it's a small ecosystem. If you've offered it to someone else, guaranteed you're going to have to offer it to someone. And so I think that how that shows up in terms of discounting in a conversation, it's the effort early on to build the pipeline so that your February deals close in February and your March deals close in March, and you've got backfill and you've done all the work. It's the pre-work. The problem is again, and it's not an easy problem. I'm not saying that we have a solution that's 100% accurate, but the problem becomes, well, if costs are going up, conversion is going down, do you really want to focus on an area of the business that's diminishing? Acquisition in general worked 2010 to 2015, and then it stopped working. Customers aren't responsive at all in terms of like just being able to reach them and get them to convert and have them lead and have them be a good customer, right?
Right.
So we have to focus on the expansion piece and retention and renewal. And where that kind of leans in, if I'm you, I'm focusing on your CS team and having really well constructed meetings. And this is going back to the fundamentals, like, don't set effective goals, assume your customer needs. Like we did a customer advisory board, digital salon last month, and ultimately it's about the customer, and 80% of the time they need to be talking and telling you what their strategic goals are. So backstepping organizationally, are you deploying a program that's going to be conducive to expansion and renewal, delivering value all along the way? Because individuals, if you leave it to them to build pipeline on their own and all of this and or marketing to contribute 30%, 20%, now some companies it's 15% of the overall revenue. What is the rest of the program to augment that? And right now in our portfolio companies, it's about CS, customer success, and delivering that value. You're a product guy, you understand jobs to be done. So the jobs to be done with CS is really optimizing areas around pre-onboarding, really early in the funnel involving the CS team, identifying the use case in the tech stand-up. It's the moment of truth, getting that first interaction after an agreement. Hopefully your sales team has gotten to the point. So you're looking at the entire customer journey when you're thinking about it this way. The agreement, if you have legal, it's like, are you going to sue your customer? Why are you going to go to battle before you even close a deal? Let's loosen that language up. I've never seen a company sue a customer for non-payment. So why do we do this? Why do we have these legal TNCs? If Delta wants to do a deal with you, take their paper, close the deal, land and expand, and then kind of really build value from there as it relates to the delivery of the value. That's where we're failing. And then you think about monitor and responding. So you have to have the systems and the tech touch we all talk about in CS. That needs to be nailed down. That's table stakes now today. Right. Reviewing and communicating results. That's your QBR piece. And the communication is so critical that it's about the customer and it's not about you and it's not a sales meeting. And then really when you think about it, the expansion and renewal just happens.
Yeah.
And you've been working with their teams and they want to work with you. Going back to that statistic, 28% don't feel that they're useful. Well, what about the rest of everybody? So is it 100% don't feel that they're useful? And do they feel like it's a sales pitch? Probably. So I think that's the area to dig deep on, and it's going to be a little bit different for every company. But we're doing that in our portfolio companies. We're looking at the different areas of touch points within, I guess, the three main strata within the customer success teams or onboarding, and being really paying attention to handoff, the different areas of internal handoff between sales and CS, and I think even there's a discussion to be had, not to go on, but there's a discussion to be had about what is the difference between CS support. This goes to organizational design and customer success. So support
Right.
and success, like how does that all work? Where's the alignment? And then how does marketing fit in that? And gone are the days where marketing just touches the top of the funnel and then they're done and everybody's high-fiving. This alignment, when I say true alignment, revenue, organizational alignment, it's about the customer journey, not about you.
So,
Mm.
okay, man, there was so much good packed in there, Justin.
There's so much in there, Todd.
I
So
know.
much.
I'm always trying to think, okay, how do I if I'm my job's the AI is to try to like, create the summary of Justin's amazing wisdom that he's dropping.
Wisdom.
Like what do I do? So I heard that the kind of the pillars that we need to think about if you're in a CS role, there's three things that stuck out to me. One is you need to think about the entire customer journey. So that's a big one, right? So don't you can't just come in and think my job is only to support the customer after it closes. You have to be thinking about them. What is your role before? What is your role during the implementation and getting everything spun up and going? And then what is your role long term? So that's a big one. One you mentioned had to do with like kind of the alignment within the organization around cross-functional support of the customer and getting where there needs to be. And then the third thing, I'm not sure if I'm summarizing your pillars correctly, but the third one I'm hearing, or the third one that jumped out to me, is the fact that you need to focus on value delivery of what the customer is asking for rather than on trying to sell them on something that you hope that they'll buy into.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this alignment is critical. I can give you an example of a portfolio company that they have companies that the top 25 pharma, which ends up being kind of it's a huge TAM within the customers that they've already closed. They've closed 9 out of the top 10 pharma, which is like 1.4 trillion if you take those companies, and so it's a massive opportunity. And when we looked at this idea of alignment, it's really a highly coordinated situation where we do a proof of concept, which ends up being, we talk about land and expand where we come in, but we're really proving out concepts and having conversations earlier in the funnel, and we're pushing that up. And so we have interest, and then we quickly try and figure out what the value is in extraction. And really an account can be a $40 million account for this portfolio company. So working within a highly coordinated handoffs, so you have your onboarding and activation, and basically making sure that the business value is built in. So orchestration of your technology is kind of embedded in that. But we talk about it in terms of phases. We don't even talk about it in terms of agreement contracts. And so really it's aligning with the way that the customer's thinking about it. And it's probably one of our better examples of true customer centricity and aligning with the customer functionally to support a successful engagement and partnership, really. Because ultimately at the end of the day, now I even hate saying partnership because it's so overused and it's so misunderstood. And so really I think it's phase one would be a POC, and that's the language we use with the large pharmaceutical manufacturer. And then phase two ends up being based on this criteria being completed. Then we roll into phase two. We're not talking about discounts. We're not talking about different features and functionality. We're talking about delivering true value and having a mutual success plan where based on these things and these milestone completions and these metrics, then we kind of roll into phase 2. And the sales team is talking about phase 3 at this point. And so based on the completion of targets and milestones, we end up actually having a natural conversation. If delivery isn't the value that the customer's expecting, then we don't move on. But at least everybody's on the same page. And I feel like when we talk about alignment and functional alignment, just to kind of simplify this discussion, because we can go in all different places, it's really about understanding the value, the task at hand, jobs to be done with your product background. You can appreciate the jobs to be done, and identifying those as a team, and then really kind of using CS as the point to facilitate that and to make sure that everything is happening like it should be.
It's awesome. Todd, I thought your AI was
Was it good?
solid. I thought that was great. I think the
In
only
the
thing
Todd bot.
that was fantastic. The only thing I would add is it almost sounds like too, Justin, just we've forgotten the customer. We've gone into all these processes, and you got to get this monthly active usage, and the customer has to do these 5 things. Well, what if those 5 things don't actually get the business value that they bought your software for? We've lost the customer because we've bogged ourselves down with so many processes. I think that's the overarching theme that I'm hearing you come back to, is these experiences that we're creating are all designed to really help the customer say, I got that value. Why would I not expand more with you? Why would I not go to phase 2 or phase 3, right? I think one of the things for me, just, kind of a best practice that I've seen that I always try to consult with people on is, if you feel that your customer isn't getting the business value, I always like, and again, part of the show, SaaS Therapy, I really just like to ask is, hey, could I just take one step back? Why did you sign this contract with us at the start? What was the business value you were trying to get to? Could we just go back and remind me of that? And then it's just like, why did we fall in love, right? Why did we enter into this agreement? Get that feedback going, and then just say, hey, have we seen any areas of success in realizing that business value? Have you seen any of that? Have there been any pockets? Oh, yeah, we've seen some in marketing. Oh, great. And how did you see that? Okay, so what we need to do is replicate that. How do you think we do that? Right? Like, it's really just taking that step back and just asking real questions about, am I delivering that business value? Be open to that. Don't be scared of that. And Justin,
Yeah.
I see you're nodding your head. What's your reaction to that?
I love it. I think it's absolutely where we need to go. I don't think we need additional processes on top of processes on top of processes, which remove us from the ultimate goal, which is to deliver value. And hopefully our products are delivering value. And so we need to have harder conversations, and we have them in the portfolio right now. Um, Trying to align areas where we have deficiencies. But look at, going back to the fundamentals, like, I really love the story about Tom Brady, who carried a worn piece of paper inside his wallet that had the fundamentals listed from when he was in Pop Warner. And one example was throw down the hall. So he has this piece of paper in his wallet. He's won the Super Bowl many times. He's the top of his game, and he's going back to the fundamentals. And it's like, throw down the hall is one of the prompts, which what he's actually really doing is going back to the comment about the neural highways that as humans we're really good at, like laying down track, is he's repaving those highways and making sure that things are still running smoothly. He's not practicing, dropping back, going off the left foot, leaning back, throwing, falling down, getting tackled. He's going through the fundamentals of, going down the hallway and other things with his footwork and different things. So it's a fascinating look at what champions are doing to actually excel at the very top of their games. And it's really the fundamentals. And you can use this in lots of different examples of this. We could go down the rat hole. But there's a Vermont ski academy that has 100 people enrolled, and 50 of them went to the Olympics. And so, you have enrollment of very highly selective enrollment of 100, and then 50 of those going to go on to be Olympic skiers. And you think about that, and you're like, wow, they're doing something. And so when I think about that, it's like selection. So we talked about, It's super important. We talked about why we need to be selective on the customers that we bring in the funnel, because in recurring businesses, you can actually, and Salesforce proved this early on, you can churn 100% of your, almost like 94% of your customer base in a year, which at the end of the day, you're just getting new customers like every year, and that you run out.
Yep.
Doesn't scale.
We started this whole thing where you mentioned the idea of as we started down this journey, I had this analogy in my mind of like when you go, there's a difference between in the stages of a relationship when you go on your first date, and what's that like? Versus once you now move into the dating phase, where now you're a couple and you're trying to figure out if you like how you're working, and you're trying to determine if you have mutual goals that you want to achieve and accomplish, and if you have the same vision for how you want your life to operate. And if it turns out that you both feel that way, then you get married, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting in this process for me. One of the things that really stuck out is maybe it's just because I like that there's a little dig at legal there, but I loved that you're like, why do we add all this onerous legal stuff? And I was like, oh, you mean like we're in love, but now I'm going to come in and I'm going to be like, right from the start, I'm going to be like, you must sign this prenup that says you will not steal all of my money. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, you don't trust me. And this is now going to turn into, instead of us actually having mutual goals, you're establishing from the start that we are actually enemies, and we're forced into a relationship together. Sorry for the analogy, but that was where my mind went through this whole process of like, go from first date to dating to marriage. Don't throw in an unnecessary prenup.
No prenups, doesn't work, causes a trust issue on day one. It's funny because my wife and I, sometimes she's like, we tricked each other on that topic, right? And I'm like, yeah. So I think ultimately you kind of have to put your best foot forward a lot of times, even with our customers, and show them, our at least what we want to deliver, and then we just do the best and focus on what we can deliver. And so we in the portfolio, again, I don't want to talk too much about this, but we talk about the controlling the controllable. And that's definitely one of those things is if you have enough there, you can have a good marriage. And it really becomes a commitment moving forward. And that's where when you get CSMs who show up and they're sloppy, ill-prepared, thinly veiled sales meeting, terrible handoff, doesn't understand the value, doesn't really follow a process in terms of like, what actually needs to happen in terms of a communication. When you think about it, you go back to fundamentals. Let's talk about hygiene, meeting hygiene, like just basics, and reviewing benchmark data and value that they've achieved in every meeting that you have, in every interaction, having that at your fingertips, and then recapping and next steps, summarizing what we went over, confirming that you've listened and you've extracted all of the value propositions that you're providing them, highlighting a date when you're going to meet next, and scheduling that next date, being clear, follow up. Like so many people are forgetting, the idea that, okay, we had this meeting, here's the summary, I'm going to follow up with written summary of what we just talked about. And if you don't respond for me, my cadence is in 2 days, I'm going to just reach back out and confirm that there's no other items for our next meeting. And you just really have this kind of fundamental approach to it. You're going to repave the CSM's neural pathways to do things the right way. And so I think that would be, if we're coming to a, kind of some conclusion and topical thing, it would just be kind of revisiting the fundamentals of how you want to show up to your customers, and what the value is that you're delivering, and how you best do that, and then provide a structure that supports that, is the main thing. And that's where we get into organizational design. And so early on, again, I use the example of a CEO is the CS guy, and then you have a salesperson doing it, and they think they're getting a book of business, but you communicate that they're not getting a book of business, and that goes into this bifurcated piece. And then as you mature, you get into CSM, account management, and customer success in a fully more robust revenue model. And and you can actually support your costs. I will throw a caveat in. Efficiency is still key. And so revenue per full-time employee is something that we look at in terms of making sure that we're maximizing potential of everybody in the company and assigning a revenue number to the people that we have. So I know that was a lot, but the fundamentals end up going down very granular. You can actually look at conversion rates for your meetings, for scheduled next steps, CRM hygiene, and really get a good reading on where you're at as an organization to kind of assess.
Well, Todd, you said Justin was going to be good. He was better than what I thought. That was awesome. Justin, this is fantastic.
My hope is people go and they re-listen to this like 5 times just so they can be like, what did he say again?
Seriously.
Because there's some real good nuggets in there.
Some great ones. So Justin, this is SaaS therapy. So we know that when you go to a therapy session, the therapy session, you always feel great, but what really matters is when you leave that office that you do something. So Justin, if you could leave our audience with one challenge, with one homework assignment, what would be that homework assignment that you would give to them? We give you free charge of saying whatever you might want to here, but for our audiences listening, what's one thing that they could do to better their relationships with their customers?
That's a really good one. I think that just revisiting the way that you're communicating at the front line, the CSM level with your customers. I think you have to revisit that. And in order to do that, you have to understand how you're listening to them. And very rarely do I see a feedback program in place, especially on our earlier investments and sometimes even mature investments. And so some kind of formal way to communicate that is via third party. And it could be a SWAT team that's internal, but it's not the sales guy calling up and getting asking a bunch of closed, win-loss analysis questions or NPS questions. It's really just kind of understanding pricing, value, sales process, customer success process, asking all the questions that you have on a quarterly basis. Just start a program. Take 200 records in your database. What we're seeing is a 10% response rate. So out of 200, records, we'll get 20 good interviews every quarter in our different portfolio companies. And then you don't have to guess, where you stand with your customer base. You can actually sidestep a lot of conjecture and thought. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you think your customer thinks. You just need to understand that. So that's what I would leave behind.
Justin, I love that. I'm gonna steal your paving the road analogy and basically summarize that by saying, if you paved the wrong road, talk to your customer and get the map to the right location. And if you paved the right road, make sure you're not neglecting it, because roads get worn out and get potholes. So make sure maybe you paved the right roll and you're not focusing on the fundamentals. Go repave the road. If you paved the wrong road, it's time to go pave a new one. So, Justin.
That's absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. Wider and straighter is better. You get a curvy road, you may want to relook at that. So simplicity is key there.
So good.
100%
Love
agree.
that, Justin. Well, as we wrap up here, if people wanted to follow you or get some of additional nuggets of wisdom, where should we point them to so they can connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn, linkedin.com/JEdwardsCA. And that stands for J Edwards at California. But at the time, I think I was an early adopter of LinkedIn, 1997. No, 2007.
I was like, wow, I didn't think LinkedIn was that old. That's amazing.
Yeah, they're not about 2007.
Oh, so good, Justin. Thank you. Yeah. You're amazing. Appreciate your insights. Everyone, if you haven't gotten enough Justin, go follow him on LinkedIn. He drops great wisdom there as well. So thank you, everybody, for attending this today's episode of SaaS Therapy, and good luck paving those roads. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks,
Hey,
Todd.
everyone.